This is Accelerated Math, Unit 1, Whole Number Computation, and today we're going to talk about greatest common factor and least common multiple. Greatest common factor is what we're going to start with, and you may have known it as what we call GCF, obviously greatest common factor. Factor is simply two numbers that will multiply together to give you a number. So, for example, if I was going to do the number 24, two factors of 24 would be 1 and 24, because when I multiply them together, I get the answer of 24. So a factor is just a number I can multiply by another factor to get that product of 24. You may remember from last year doing factor rainbows. So for example, if I was going to do the number 24, my factor rainbows would start with 1 and 24, because 1 times 24 is 24. And then I would do 2 times 12, 3 times 8, and 4 times 6. And you'll notice I kind of build my way into the middle, and I have all those factors listed. Now, when we want the greatest common factor, what we want is the factors of two numbers, and we want to find the biggest one that they have in common, that they both have. I'm going to show you another way to find the greatest common factor. Now, of course, I could do factor rainbows for the two numbers. So, for example, let's say that I was going to keep that number 24, and I wanted to know what the greatest common factor was between 12 and 24. I could then go ahead and make factor rainbows for 12. I would have 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and of course 3 and 4. And so when I'm looking at the greatest common factor between 24 and 12, I'm looking at the biggest number that they have in common. I see that they have 1. Every number has a factor of 1. 2 in common, 3 and 4, 6, and then of course 12. And the biggest one there that they have in common is 12. So the greatest common factor of 24 and 12 is 12. Sometimes the greatest common factor might just be 1 between two numbers. It can be any of them, but factors will definitely be smaller than the original number or equal to the original number. So when we're talking about least common multiple, a lot of students will get these two confused. Least common multiple, or maybe what you heard of LCM, or maybe when you're dealing with fractions, least common denominator. When we look at that word multiple, to get a multiple, we have to multiply. So let's say, for example, I want the least, meaning the smallest common, one that they have that is the same, multiple of those same numbers, 12 and 24. Here, I would start to list my multiples by thinking, okay, what is 12 times 1? Well, my first multiple would be 12, and of course, 24 times 1 would be 24. Then, my next one, I'm going to say, okay, what's 12 times 2? 24. And 24 times 2, I'd get 48. Then I would keep going. What is 12 times 3? And I would get 36. And of course, 24 times 3, that's right, 72. And I could keep going. In this case, though, I want the smallest number that they have in common. So I'm looking for ones that they have in common. So I see 24 here and 24 here. And the smallest one, 24 is the smallest. So the least common multiple of 12 and 24 is going to be 24. Now, I told you I was going to teach you another way to do this. So we're going to take another number besides 12 and 24. Let's go ahead and take 24 and 36. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and clean off my screen. And I'm going to show you another way that we can do this. So again, I'm going to take the numbers 24 and 36. We can use what's called the ladder method. Let me show you how that looks like, what that looks like. So I'm going to take that number 24 and 36, and I'm thinking of a number. So at first I'm looking at factors. So I'm thinking of a number that will divide into both 24 and 36. And I see that they're both even, so I know 2 will divide into those. When I take 24 and I divide it by 2, I'm going to get 12. And if I take 36 and divide it by 2, I'm going to get 18. But I know that those are both still even. So I know I can go ahead and divide them by 2 again. 2 goes into 12 6 times, and 2 goes into 18 9 times. Now 6 and 9 are not even, but I do know that I can divide both by 3. So I'm going to go ahead and draw another ladder. And 6 divided by 3 is 2, and 9 divided by 3 is 3. Okay, and I'm to the end because I can't divide anything into 2 or 3 except for 1, and 1 won't get me anywhere. So I am at the end. I'm going to circle those two numbers. Using the ladder method, if I wanted to find the greatest common factor, you'll notice I created a ladder, L shape here. If I wanted to find the greatest common factor, I need to multiply these numbers that are on the outside of my ladder together. So greatest common factor, I would take 2 times 2 times 3. 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 3 is 12. So the greatest common factor of 24 and 36 is 12. And I can double check it. 12 goes into 24 2 times, and 12 goes into 36 3 times, just to double check it. Now to find the least common multiple, I'm going to go ahead and multiply all of these numbers. So to find the least common multiple, I'm going to take 2 times 3, which I already know from the other side is equal to 12. And then I'm also going to multiply it by 2 and by 3. 12 times 2 is 24, and 24 times 3, that's right, 72. So my least common multiple is 72. So I can use this idea of the ladder method to help me find not only the greatest common factor, again, a factor being the two numbers that multiply together to give me that number, I can also use it to find the multiple. Now, this works really well. In the past, we've used this for fractions, but in the future, we'll also use this when we look at the distributive property. And the reason why it fits in here with expressions is we'll use that distributive property to kind of break down those expressions and equations as we move further in math. For now, this is greatest common factor, least common multiple. This is Unit 1, greatest common factor, least common multiple of accelerated math.